the Department of Justice releasing the Fisa application, heavily redacted.
The documents include an October 2016 application to wiretap Page. Carter Page tells Fox News in a statement, "I'm having trouble finding any small bit of this document that rises above complete ignorance and or insanity."
The great mystery is why the president has not spoken up for our country. The best way to deal with that is to vote in November.
A woman is killed during a supermarket standoff. Up to 50 people were inside a Los Angeles Trader Joe's when the terrifying siege began. The 3-hour standoff ended when the suspect walked out in handcuffs.
Big thank you to the incredible bravery that was demonstrated by the men and women who responded to this.
You would have declared your support for Aide.
Pretty wet morning here in New York City. Right? I mean, it downpoured last night. We were sleeping through it, but I could hear it on my roof.
I woke up a bunch of times.
I hope sound system.
I hope it's warm and dry where you are, because who cares what's happening in New York? You care about what's happening in America.
Well, but we live here.
It's part of America.
We care about ourselves.
It's just a small sliver of America.
Yeah.
The rest of you, we hope you had warm, comfortable, great sleep last night.
Yeah. And Reba and Florida Georgia Line there meant to be. Let me tell you what was meant to be, and that is the Fisa document being released. Thanks to Tom.
Good transition.
Judicial Watch.
Very nicely done.
FOIA requests have brought forth the wonderful 412
Get those pages. Hold it up for me. It's not a small document.
This is that's the so we're going to get to the significant meat part of this, which is.
Wait, you just had the meat part of this?
Show it to the people.
Here you go. So this page, and then this page, and then this page, and I was really stunned on this page.
Tell me more.
And then when I got here, I didn't know what to do with myself. And it goes on and on and on. But it is a significant development. It is a release. It is something that we have not seen before.
Keep those pages in order, Griff. Keep them in order.
I have to.
No wonder he said when I was reading page 318, and Pete and I are like, oh, wow, you read a lot more than we did. Now it makes sense. He only read about 10 pages that had writing on them.
You know, so the president, so this is a FISA. We've been waiting to see any semblance of these FISA applications because they're highly classified. And Judicial Watch did the hard work of FOIAing them. They've been released, highly redacted. The president weighing in just moments ago on Twitter saying this. He said, "Congratulations to Judicial Watch and Tom Fitton on being successful in getting the Carter Page FISA documents." Of course, this is all about surveilling Carter Page. As usual, and the Trump campaign, as usual, heavily redacted, but confirmed with little doubt that the Department of, quote, Justice and FBI misled the courts, a witch hunt rigged, a scam. And I will say that when I read it this morning, reading through it, I read the first 40 pages, which means I really read like 7 because they were redacted. What struck out to me was source number 1. Source number 1 referred to throughout the document is
the dossier.
The dossier. Christopher Steele is source number 1 throughout this document in the information used to justify not just surveillance of Carter Page, but in the document it says the same authorities that this warrant gives may also incidentally acquire other foreign intel information. So while we're surveilling Carter Page, maybe we find a bunch of other stuff, and if we do, we could use that too, which is part of the speculation of why this began in the first place.
So what this comes down to, you need evidence to get a FISA warrant, to search someone,
Correct.
to get... So the big question this whole time is what has that evidence been? Because the dossier and the warrant and all that ultimately led to what is playing out now in this Mueller investigation. And so the bigger picture of all of this is what did they use evidence did they use to get to where we are today? And that is why you've got a lot of Republicans that are frustrated saying we still don't have all the information that we need. Why is so much still redacted? You know, we understand the FBI. Obviously, you want to cover your sources. You want to keep close. You know, how you do certain things. But is that going to take up that much room in the document?
Well, listen, there's something in here for everybody in the sense that Republicans, like Mark Meadows, the House Freedom Caucus chairman, says we've got to see more. In the name of transparency, we need to know more about it, and he has a strong argument there. But then Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi is putting out a statement along with some other Democrats saying that, hey, look, this shows Carter Page should have been surveilled. But one of the things that Pete's holding in his hand is a development, and we're going to have Andrew McCarthy, U.S. attorney on Fox News contributor on, who knows this stuff much better than I. But one of the developments is that source number 1 was ultimately dismissed as a credible source because of disclosures he made, but yet
Christopher Steele,
but yet Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein still signed off on the continuation.
The person who made the dossier was discredited.
Correct.
But the documents were still moved forward as being credible.
And as Andy McCarthy will point out, I talked to him in the green room. It was fascinating. You're going to want to stick around and hear what he has to say because he's read through this whole thing. He knows this. This is not just the first FISA application you have there. It's the renewal and the renewal of it. And he said what's really interesting is why and how it could have been renewed in light of the fact that the source number one had been discredited, and they're relying on other sources. Another question here is...
That's important. Let me stop for 1 second, because the pages we were holding up, the blank, 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 these are the subsequent pages that follow immediately after we learn that source number one has been dismissed. And that is why Andy McCarthy is going to point out we've got to know more, because those are the additional sources we don't know anything about.
Interesting. One other thing I want to point out, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, something to think about this morning. He signed off on this document, certifying the facts as truthful and certifying that the FBI investigation is lawful. So if he's overseeing the Mueller investigation, is he not conflicted? Rosenstein, a part of this that we now know is so based on source number one dossier, how can he be giving an honest and earnest look into so-called Russian collusion? A lot of questions.
So there's going to be a hearing on tomorrow.
Well, we'll see.
Right?
Listen.
Well, there will be at some point, especially after this came out, because people are going to want to understand why they're not getting more information. And to your point, that very question of why you discredited Christopher Steele and why you kept moving forward with those documents.
If Attorney General Jeff Sessions recused himself for no reason at all, how is Rod Rosenstein still in charge of this investigation ultimately?
Bottom line, he's on the hook for this.
He's totally on the hook.
Questions tomorrow.
Yeah. Send us your thoughts on this, friends at FoxNews.com. But yeah, you don't want to go anywhere because 7:15. It's going to be a great interview.
Andy McCarthy knows what he's talking about.
Good perspective. Yeah.
Very interesting.
There's some other news going on.
That's right. So
have you guys been to Comic-Con?
I've never been to Comic-Con.
I have. It is fascinating.
You know, a guy who used to host the weekend show here, Clayton Morris.
He lived for Comic-Con.
He lived for Comic-Con. I love the guy. And it's all about comics and cartoons and superheroes.
Like Power Rangers, things that
Fantasyland,
we grew up with.
Stuff like that. Yeah. It's all about stuff that kids and adults and people who want to think imaginatively think about. Well,
but they also do political panels.
Oh, do they?
They do panels. They do panels, and they have conversations in their own world that they live in. But there was a political panel at Comic-Con, and it got a little bit out of control. It talked about impeaching Trump with magic.
Wow. So actors were asked if they could use magic for good in real life, what would they do? Zoe Kravitz. I don't know. Yeah, you should read it. I don't know who these people are.
She's the one on the left right there, saying impeach Trump, and Dan Fogler, impeachus Maximus. I don't even understand half of this, but I guess
it's like Harry Potter, impeachus Maximus. So it's like, if I could use my powers for goods, we would impeach Trump. You can't even go to a comic
It's
convention.
wizard speak.
Wizard speak.
So this is a tweet from Jacob Hall. It says, Fantastic Beasts cast says that they'd use real-life magic to impeach Trump, joke about impeachment spells. Guy behind me is pissed. They had to ruin it. You have to imagine at Comic-Con, you got a mix of people there, and I'm sure a number of people that did come out and vote for Donald Trump and feel happy about where the country is.
Guy behind me speaks for all of us. Guy behind me is the guy watching the NFL who's like, why you got to ruin my anthem? Guy behind me is like, actors, I want to watch your movies. Why you got to ruin my movies? I can't even go to Comic-Con. Guy behind me is like, I'm done. Come on. Can we just talk about, like, the Avengers?
I mean, when you start politicizing Comic-Con, there's no place that's safe.
This is like
there's no place that's not political.
Impeach Trump ride Disneyland. You take your kids for like a getaway to have a fun time, and you get.
They check you into the ride for like the teacup. Who did you vote for?
Let us know if you were.
No teacup ride for you, Griff.
Nope.
What do you say?
Friends at FoxNews.com. Email us if you were the guy behind. What would you say about the fact that now even comic book conventions have turned political? But I bet, people that like comics are half are Republicans, half are Democrats.
What would Harry Potter say?
Right about that.
What would Harry Potter say, Griff?
Yeah.
What would Harry Potter say? Friends at FoxNews.com. Fill in our brains.
We have got a lot of news, though, coming to our newsroom this morning. I do want to bring you some headlines, starting on a serious note with a Fox News alert. And a woman is killed during a supermarket standoff. Up to 50 people were inside a Los Angeles Trader Joe's when the terrifying siege began.
I hear about 6 more shots, so I'm pretty sure they were returning fire at him. Just a scary moment.
Then I saw people just running towards the back of the store, so I knew that, you know, something was wrong.
No.
People were running for their lives as others escaped through windows. A Trader Joe's employee was shot dead inside. The 3-hour standoff ended when the suspect walked out in handcuffs. Earlier in the day, the suspect shot his girlfriend and his grandmother, who are in critical condition. And you are looking at a sketch of a man right now, right there on your screen, police believe killed George H.W. Bush's former cardiologist. Dr. Mark Houseknecht gunned down in broad daylight as he rode his bicycle to work at Houston Methodist Hospital. The shooter was also on a bike. Witnesses described the suspect as a man about 5'10" with a slender build. Police are looking into whether it was a targeted attack. We'll keep a close eye on that story. Also, this Intel leader, Dan Coats, says that he meant no disrespect after facing criticism for saying this.
That Vladimir Putin is coming to the White House in the fall.
Say that again?
The director of national intelligence issuing a statement reading this in part, quote, "My admittedly awkward response was in no way meant to be disrespectful or criticize the actions of the president." Coats adding that he and the intelligence community are focused on supporting President Trump's efforts. So you heard it there. And a happy birthday to Prince George, Britain's Prince William and Kate Middleton sharing a new picture of their oldest child as he turns 5 years old today. The royal family thanking Twitter followers for all of the lovely messages. The smiling little royal is third in line to the throne. Man, these kids just going so fast. What a cutie.
George, looking good.
What a cutie.
It's true. You talked about the DNI, the current DNI, the DNI under Obama. I've been reading through this document. Yeah. He said, quote, Russia has tried to influence U.S. elections since the 1960s during the Cold War. There's a tradition in Russia of interfering with elections, their own and ours. That was James Clapper.
You're hooked.
2016.
You're hooked.
I mean,
and here's the deal.
Must read.
We just told you about the DOJ releasing those Carter-Page Fisa documents. Pete is ecstatic. Former U.S. Attorney Andrew McCarthy says it confirms what he's been saying for a year. Unfortunately for you, he joins us live next.
Very interesting. And Hillary Clinton is back talking trash and taking aim at the president.
The great mystery is why the president has not spoken up for our country.
Welcome back. Well, the DOJ releasing more than 400 pages of FISA documents. Although heavily redacted, they do reveal that the anti-Trump dossier was not just a major factor, it was source number one in the warrants for surveillance of former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page.
Here to react, Fox News contributor and former federal prosecutor Andrew McCarthy. We are really looking forward to hearing your perspective. You have now devoured the documents. What is your takeaway?
I'm really embarrassed because I told people for months that this could never, ever happen. What I told people was that you're not even going to hear about the dossier when we finally learn what's in the FISA warrants, that what the FBI will do is what the FBI always does, which is they'll take 7 or 8 facts that are important, they'll scrub them so that the FBI can verify and corroborate them, and those will be put into the affidavit, and that'll be the only thing you hear about. When you read this thing, it's astonishing. They actually, it's as if they took the dossier and slapped whole cloth district court caption on it and gave it to the judge, which is exactly what I told people would never happen.
There's a nugget. We were just in the break. You found a nugget, which I did not, but that's because only you can find this. What have you found?
Well, actually, I must say, I mean, this is so bad that they ought to be looking at the judges who signed off on this stuff, not just the people who gave it. And it doesn't take, if you've done this stuff, it doesn't take, this is so bad, it screams out at you. But this says, this is just 3 lines, 3.5 lines.
Page 58. You can check
53.
53? Sorry.
Right. The FBI has reviewed this verified application for accuracy in accordance with its procedures. They haven't verified it, and it's not accurate. So, you know, the two most important things, 3.5 lines, they can't even get that right.
Now, that says that, so that our viewers, some of them maybe just waking up, is suggesting that they verified as accurate and factual the dossier, which we know has so many holes, and that is the source number one.
Right. What they're saying is the assertions we're making to the court, we verified. Now, just to explain how this works, let's say, forget about Fisa and intelligence. Let's say it's a drug case, and I want a warrant because I think they're selling or they're making heroin packages in a house, right? So I bring my agent to the judge, and I say, we need a search warrant. And the judge says, fine, what's your probable cause? And I say, Judge, I have this great agent here. Every year he wins Agent of the Year. He is like the best agent. He's got the most awards. The judge will look at me and say, but what's the probable cause? What did the people see, and who are the people who saw it, and why should I believe
What if he brought media reports? Would they count?
Well, I would have to bring media reports if I didn't have anything else, right? Because what they did here was they have this guy Steele who helped them in another case. And they don't have any idea who his sources are. His sources are unidentified. They're Russians. And they themselves are operating on hearsay information. So for the most part, even his sources are not claiming that they saw and heard the things that they're asking the judge to rely on. But the government isn't even bringing the sources to them. They're bringing Steele.
And they're verifying this is accurate. Let me just point out that on the next page, on page 54, we have the signature for verification. I doubt you can see that. We'll try and get it for you. It's page 54, and it says, I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing information regarding Carter Page is true and correct, the verification, and it is Supervisory Special Agent FBI. But that is, as you can see, redacted. Do you believe this morning, Andrew, that this agent should be at least behind closed doors interviewed as to why he would verify something that is now known to not be fully and wholly accurate?
You know, I'm betting number one, he probably has been interviewed already. I don't know why they redact the name of the agent, since the names of the judges are unredacted.
Right.
Why the agent should not be redacted or should be redacted, I don't know. And what I'm sure they would tell you is what I meant when I said it was true and accurate is that this really is what Steele told us. But that isn't what you need to. What you need to know is why should the judge believe what Steele represented his sources?
And Andy, you said multiple times it was renewed because of media reports.
Well, if you look at it, Pete, you know, they keep going back every 3 months. The warrant looks exactly the same. Now, you pointed out, Griff, that there's all kinds of redacted stuff, so we don't know what more they added. But it looks to me like they just keep bringing back the same stuff, including the Michael Isikoff article.
Yeah.
We've got to leave it there. We're out of time.
I think they'd have new info.
Fascinating.
Andy McCarthy, thank you for getting up early.
All right, more Fox and Friends right after this.
Great stuff.
Good Sunday morning. Time now for your news by the numbers. First, $16 million. That's how much this Miami mansion was worth when it went up in flames. No one was hurt, and investigators are working to find out what sparked the blaze. Next, 17 feet. That's how big a great white shark was swimming off the coast of California.
Oh my God. Holy wow. That's big. Whoa. Oh my God.
We're going to need a bigger boat. Passengers aboard a charter fishing boat watching in awe as the monster shark went by. And finally, 11. That's how old this college graduate is. William Miles, earning his associate's degree at St. Petersburg College and planning to study at the University of South Florida this fall. He wants to become an astrophysicist. Abby, Pete?
Wow, he puts all of us to shame. Good for him. That was a huge shark, too. My goodness. All right, well, comedian Michelle Wolf, who infamously attacked White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, is at it again, this time comparing ICE to ISIS terrorists in a new skit. Watch this.
It's popular nowadays to say ICE is bad, but there's no better representation of American values right now than ISIS. And as an equal opportunity employer, we accept all levels of experience and education, from low to very low, and actively welcome those with diagnosed anger issues. Take it from me, no organization is better than ISIS.
Low to very low. Joining us now with his reaction, Joey Jones. He's a retired U.S. Marine Corps bomb technician who lost his legs in a bomb blast in Afghanistan. while fighting many of those very same Islamist terrorists. Joey, good morning. So when you see a video like this, you fought folks, whether it's Al-Qaeda or ISIS, who have those views of our world, yet this so-called comedian makes a comparison to law enforcement in our country. How does it stick with you?
Well, Michelle Wolf has reached that point in a comedian's career where you go from overnight sensation with cheap shots at Sarah Sanders to literally recycling old material. You know, it was outrageous when SNL parodied ISIS as they were burning people alive years ago, and it's just sad that Michelle Wolf is trying to recycle the same stuff and attacking honorable men and women while doing so.
What would you say to her?
The real irony.
What would you say to if you sat across the table from Michelle Wolf? What would you say to her about ISIS? Help her understand and help people understand how dangerous ISIS actually is and how absurd this comparison is.
Well, quite honestly, if you're living in this country today and you have social media or news media in front of you and you don't understand the severity of ISIS, I can't help you. If you've not seen the videos of people being burned alive, I can't explain it to you any better. Yeah, I lost my legs, but more importantly, a lot of people lost their lives fighting this war in the last 10, 15 years. But beyond that, the real irony here is that she's attacking ICE. We're talking about Border Patrol and ICE, organizations made from veterans that are, I believe, at least 50% Hispanic. So to say that these organizations are stupid or wrong, they've been called monsters. They've been called a terrorist organization. I shared with your producers a picture of a good friend of mine, Vince Vargas, that was a Border Patrol agent after serving as an Army Special Forces operator in Iraq and Afghanistan. Vince is now out in Hollywood working on new shows, doing great things with his career. But before any of that, he worked as a Border Patrol agent. And on this picture that he shared, he shows that this girl was sent across the river with nothing more than a note. And Vince greeted her with a hug. He greeted her with compassion. And a lot of these people, a lot of these unaccompanied children, that's the first sign of compassion they get from this country is someone like Vince bringing them into custody and keeping them safe. And to paint them as anything other than heroes is absolutely malpractice. The truth of it is there's one culprit in situations like this when kids are in cages, and that's called the government. But that culprit exists in the VA. That culprit exists at the IRS. That culprit exists at the FBI right now. You know, the one thing the Republicans don't do is they don't say that the FBI is an espionage agency. They don't call them, a counter to democratic system agency. We say first and foremost that the majority of people at the FBI are heroes that love this country. Yeah. And if we could get that same amount of respect for ICE from liberals, that would be an amazing thing.
It's a great point. While you're indicting the FBI, you don't have to call them a terrorist organization, which is exactly what the left does of ICE. And you raise a great point. So many of these men and women who serve in ICE were former veterans, former law enforcement, and many are minorities or Hispanic. To impugn them is to impugn their background and their service. So when you call them ISIS, you're calling them the enemy.
Yeah. So well said, Joey Jones. This is why we have you on. A great perspective this morning. Always good to see you.
Good stuff. Thank you, sir.
Have a great Sunday.
All right. Well, is there an insurgency growing, a socialist one, in the Democratic Party? The New York Times says there is, and that it's going to shift it even further left. Good for them. David Bossie and Anthony Scaramucci, they're here to react live. Coming up next.
And high rent? No problem. Kamala Harris says the federal government should help. More on that.
Wish we could turn back time.
Oh! You're up. I can feel the palm sweating. Isn't it your shot?
It's your shot.
It's my shot. Stay calm, everybody.
I got this.
Yeah!
All right, heating up.
Oh!
Handicap.
Hey! Come on, peanut gallery. Let's go here, okay?
Okay, that was last night on Waters World. Jesse Waters and Anthony Scaramucci took on the national beer pong champs. Now, we showed you all of their highlights, literally. I think the beer pong champs eventually went on to smoke them. I'm going to bring in Anthony Scaramucci, former White House communications director, and David Bossie, Fox News contributor and former deputy campaign manager. Okay, Anthony, come on. We showed the best we could, but you guys kind of got smoked last night.
We absolutely got eviscerated and destroyed, but we did it gallantly. That's all I have to say.
You did, with a lot of you're trying to distract
you know what,
him.
though? You talked the game. You really played the role well. You had a lot of confidence. That's all that matters, you know?
Yeah. Listen, you guys played beer pong in New York.
Hey, listen, the only thing I have is like psychological warfare, guys. That's all I have.
Well, listen, Dave Bossy and I play Fisa documents in D.C., and that is where we got to take that hard turn to the fact that we now have these 400 pages. Gentlemen, we just had Andrew McCarthy, U.S. Attorney, on, and a Fox News contributor, who walked us through a little bit of it. And one of the fascinating parts of it, just to sort of summarize, particularly for viewers who may be just waking up, we've learned that the Steele dossier was a major component of the warrant for what has now become the Mueller investigation.
It was source number one.
Andrew McCarthy says that the FBI, on page 53, says that it was verified, and we know that obviously isn't true. Gentlemen, I'll start with you, Dave. What do you make of this release and what we're learning?
Well, let's cover a couple of things. One is this looks like about 80 or 90% redacted, but what we are finding out is exactly what you just said, which was the Steele dossier was the basis for this entire case, this entire investigation, which calls it, look, Hillary Clinton paid for the Steele dossier. We now understand through this release that was a major component to getting the FISA warrant to collect data to collect information on our campaign. It's outrageous. What I will also say is that we now understand why the Department of Justice is fighting Congress for releasing the documents to Congress. They must turn over the rest of these documents this week, or the president should declassify them. This is outrageous, and I think we're getting to the bottom of it.
Anthony, how are Trump supporters going to read this? Folks that are waking up this morning saying, okay, dossier used, A number one as evidence. What does it tell me about the nexus of this investigation?
Well, I think it definitely has hardened them in their support. There's a reason why 90% of the Republican Party is behind the president. But in addition to what David is saying, just think about when we always talk about the cover-up being worse than the crime. The Justice Department would be so much better served right now if they just admit that this thing is a catastrophe, pull back, and go into full retreat. And so they're not going to do that, of course, because of the stubbornness, but yet they've constantly attacked us on the campaign about different things like this. So the hypocrisy abounds inside of Washington, and this is very, very good for the president going into the midterms. I predict as this stuff starts to come out, his popularity will rise, and so will the people that he's supporting in the midterms.
Dave, let me just quickly ask you, because you're saying, the president should declassify the rest of it if it's not forthcoming, but with regards to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, what we've learned is that source number one, Christopher Steele, was discredited as a source. Do you believe that this raises questions for Rod Rosenstein, and do they rise to the level of recusal?
It's very troubling. It's very troubling to see him signing on to this FISA warrant. I'll be honest with you. I think that what Jeff Sessions did, there's no comparison here. He met a Russian ambassador at a reception and he recused himself. Rod Rosenstein must recuse himself, and it calls into question his judgment as somebody who is fighting Congress for the release of these documents. Now we understand through this redaction, or through this release of documents, that he actually signed the document to allow the FISA warrant. I don't understand how he could oversee this, and now I understand, and it calls into question the judgment at the top levels of the Department of Justice and FBI. We see why, all these agents, Strzok and Page and others, were hating this president and doing whatever it could, using the Steele dossier as the underlying evidence to get these fake FISA warrants. And it's just devastating to this country what they have done.
Yeah, we're not talking about low-level employees. I mean, it's fascinating, incredible that it continues to go back to the highest levels within the DOJ at the FBI. You mentioned Hillary Clinton earlier, David, and Anthony, I want to get your take on this. She was out and about last night here in New York City at Aussie Fest, and she took the time to talk about politics, as she often does, and attack the president, President Trump, for his handling of the Russia summit last week. Here's what she said about that.
Is why the president has not spoken up for our country. Yes. And we saw that most clearly in this recent meeting with Putin. We don't know what was said in the room, where just the two of them.
My reaction to that is I think we all remember that moment where she physically held up that reset button. You remember with Foreign Minister Lavrov of Russia to reset the relationship between the United States and Russia back when she was Secretary of State. Much of where we are today is because our inability to get it right with Russia all the years leading up to where we are now. So isn't she in part to blame for where we are?
Well, she's certainly in part to blame, but I think the bigger thing here is that she's running for president, and so it's just obvious to me that she's going to do everything she can to get herself inserted into the 2020 race. And I'll tell you what, she'll probably run for president in 2060 off of a Ouija board. She does not want to leave the earth or be in the beyond not being the president of the United States. So it's just very, very interesting that she's not going to give up in any way, shape, or form. Now, I personally sort of admire that, even though I don't like her policies, that she's that relentless. But if you're saying that she's hypocritical about the Russian situation and our ability to get along with the Russians, of course she is, Abby, and that's the biggest problem in politics. And that's why the American people are so frustrated, and so many of them are supporting the president's mission to try to reduce tensions with Russia.
David, you were the deputy campaign manager on the campaign that beat Hillary Clinton. Please give us your commentary on that, but also the front page of this morning's failing New York Times talk about how the Democrats are bracing for moving even further to the left. What is that preview for what the Democrat Party would be and who their nominee might be?
Yeah, Hillary Clinton is really doing a lot of damage to herself and to this country. Al Gore, when he lost, could have easily, for the next year or two, put himself in a position against President Bush and tried to attack his policies and said that he won the election when he didn't. And this is what Hillary Clinton is doing. She's doing great damage to our democracy, and we have to take it seriously. She is so angry and hate-filled that she lost this election fair and square to our great president, that she cannot get over it. It's been nearly 19 months or 20 months since the election. She clearly is not over it. And look, the Obama administration did everything politically it could to try and stop this president. That's why there needs to be more hearings about that. But to go to the midterms, the Democrats continue to go to the left. They continue to nominate the wildest-eyed, crazy liberal leftist in race after race across the country. And I welcome that with open arms, because it's going to show this November, when you have Republicans who are saying we're going to be for law and order, we're going to support the men and women of ICE and Border Patrol, we're going to be cutting your taxes, we're going to be trying to build a wall, we're going to be for security at home and abroad, against the left. It is going to be a clear picture, and I think the American people are going to reward us for it.
And I just want to end where we began, and that is a little D.C.-New York rivalry. Pete and Anthony versus Griff and Dave, beer pong, date TBD.
Anytime. I'll take the mooch on my team anytime. It's a great
I'll
shot.
be practicing for the next 6 months.
Keep practicing. Keep practicing.
Good to see you both. Have
Thanks,
a great
guys.
day.
I'll keep coming back.
So much.
Yeah.
You got it.
All right, we'll see you soon. Out to Rick Wright for a little weather. Is it raining out there, Rick? It was raining all night, but it seems like it's just a little damp now.
Big storms. In fact, all kinds of flooding went through parts of the mid-Atlantic around the D.C. area and around Baltimore as well. Some spots picking up a quick 3 to 6 inches of rain, and that caused big problems. More rain coming. Take a look at the maps. Let me show you what's going on. That's rain. There's also heat. This is the map of down across parts of the south. Last hour, by the way, I apologize. I had the wrong date on there. So take a look at this. Dallas today, 109, 104 tomorrow. The break comes on Tuesday for almost everybody. Oklahoma City, you've already cooled down a little bit, which is great news. Here's the Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley, Northeast. Everybody in the shot for a chance of rain throughout the day today. Down to the southeast, the northern part of Florida, get ready for some potentially some flooding rains as well. And then the heat continues down across the south. All right, guys, back to you inside.
All right. Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, a massive manhunt intensifying for the gunman who killed the former heart doctor of President H.W. Bush. One of his friends and colleagues joins us next hour.
And former Vice President Joe Biden blasting President Trump's border policy.
This administration's policy that literally ripped babies from the arms of their mothers and fathers. It's one of the darkest moments in our history.
Darkest moments. National Border Patrol Council President Brandon Judd says Biden did nothing to try and change the laws when he was in office. He comes up next.
This administration's policy that literally ripped babies from the arms of their mothers and fathers. It's one of the darkest moments in our history.
Former Vice President Joe Biden slamming President Trump's border policies, but didn't some of these policies start under the Obama administration? Here to react, President of the National Border Patrol Council, Brandon Judd. Brandon, good morning. Thanks for joining us this Sunday. What do you make of Vice President Biden's comments?
Griff, first off, it's not one of the darkest days. This is hypocritical partisan politics, and frankly, it's very disappointing coming from a former vice president. But let's be honest, Vice President Biden did nothing while he was a U.S. Senator or while he was the Vice President of the United States to change these laws. What President Trump is doing is he's enforcing the laws, trying to keep the people of the United States safe, and to come out and say that it's the darkest day in American history, frankly, it's disgusting to see somebody say that.
You say it's disgusting, but is this, Brandon, just simply a preview of midterm and maybe even 2020 politics? Biden's name obviously on a short list because he's speaking to LULAC, right? The largest group of immigrants' rights groups, the League of United Latin American Citizens. And LULAC protested the McAllen, Texas Border Patrol Processing Center that I went to that was created under President Obama and Vice President Biden.
Well, again, if you look at what the left accuses President Trump of doing, they constantly accuse him of playing to his base, when in reality what's happening is you have all of these leftists that are playing to their base, trying to position themselves to make a run in 2020, trying to position the Democrats to take over the House and the Senate. And frankly, what we have to do, and what I hope that the Republicans are looking at and seeing, the voters out there, is I hope that they're seeing that this is the attempt that they're making, and I hope that the Republicans turn out to vote.
Brandon, I want to quickly ask you, too, we've seen all this past week the condemnation of ICE agents. ICE works hand in hand in risking their lives to secure our border with you guys in the Border Patrol. Does it trouble you what you're hearing about not supporting ICE agents?
Well, Griff, if you look at it, I mean, you have done an awful lot of reporting on this specific issue. You know better than most that the Border Patrol is the one federal law enforcement agency in the entire nation that has more minorities than it does whites. And if this was about race, if President Trump was a racist, if he was xenophobic, if he was homophobic, we wouldn't have the leader that we have in the Border Patrol right now. We wouldn't have all of the minorities we have in the Border Patrol. And this president clearly supports this agency. It has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with the rule of law, saying that these are the laws that Congress passed, including Joe Biden, and these are the laws that we have to enforce. And if we don't enforce those laws, we just don't have a country.
All right. Brandon Judd, President of the National Border Patrol Council, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Griff.
All right. More proof of just how far left the Democratic Party is shifting. A liberal congressional candidate repeatedly gets booed because she showed support for ICE. We'll show you the video from the outrageous debate. And we're getting a look at some Israeli artifacts that are over 2,000 years old. You see them there. Our next guest shares how they expose the truth of ancient Jerusalem. Stick with us.
Welcome back. For more than 3,000 years, Jerusalem has played a central role in the history of the Jewish people, culturally, politically, and spiritually. Zev Ornstein is here from Israel with some of the artifacts dating back thousands of years. Zev, thanks for being here. I met you on a tour of the city of David, just outside the old city of Jerusalem. Right. You brought some artifacts out that amazed us. Talk to us a little bit about what you brought here to New York and how they tie the Jewish people to Jerusalem.
Terrific. So we have here, for starters, an ancient seal. This seal is 2,500 years old, and this seal belongs to a man mentioned in the book of Jeremiah. His name is Baalis, king of Ammon, and he hired an assassin to kill the Jewish governor of Jerusalem in 586 before the Common Era.
Interesting. 586 to kill the Jewish
governor of Jerusalem. Mentioned in the book of Jeremiah.
Wow. When I was there, you talked a little bit about these seals as well.
Absolutely.
Additional coins.
Right. So you have over here ancient coins with Hebrew writing. This coin over here is a silver half-shekel coin. It goes back 2,000 years, and in ancient Hebrew writing, it says the words, Holy Jerusalem. Right? 2,000 years ago, already the Jewish
shekel is?
A shekel is a weight. It's also the currency in Israel today.
Yes.
And in the Bible, this was what was brought as a temple tax to the temple in Jerusalem.
Okay, so a lot of people watching right now will say, okay, I don't dispute this. Of course, Jews have been in Jerusalem. But tell me why this stuff that you're unearthing right now matters today.
So it matters for two reasons. First, while many of your viewers might not dispute it, sadly today you have those in the Palestinian leadership, like Mahmoud Abbas, also the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, that passed repeated resolutions denying the Jewish and also by extension Christian connection to Jerusalem, and they condemn the archaeology. And you might wonder, why would the United Nations care about archaeology? Except the archaeological excavations taking place most notably in the city of David are affirming, not as a matter of faith, but as a matter of fact, the connection of the Jewish people to Jerusalem.
Even the Supreme Muslim Council in 1924 pointed out that, of course, Jews have a historic connection to
Absolutely,
Jerusalem.
this is beyond dispute.
Yes.
Universal belief, the connection. And we have over here ash from the destruction of the temple, removed from the Temple Mount in the late 90s. This is real ash found on the Temple Mount, which affirms the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans.
Zev, incredibly interesting stuff. I know it's changed my perspective and my life and understanding of that region. And history really can prove the recent. Zev, thanks
Absolutely.
a lot.
Thanks so much.
Checking this stuff out.
Thank you.
For coming to Fox and Friends. All right, well, up next, declassified and unredacted. The DOJ releases hundreds of FISA documents revealing details leading up to the surveillance in the 2016 election. A live report from Washington coming up next.